Okay. We're going to continue in the Gemara that we left off with last week, which is Tractate Sanhedrin, 91a on the very bottom of the page. And we'll see, maybe we'll stick with this tractate for a little while. This is one of the more famous chapters in Talmud called the Perek Chelek, which is the 11th chapter of Sanhedrin, which shares some of the very essential ideas of Judaism, and with many stories and parables, but essential ideas conveyed in lighter Talmudic texts. So maybe it's good for our Thursday night class. All right. So last week, if you recall, I'm not going to get back and repeat everything, but there was a dialogue between, anybody remember the man's name offhand? So you get extra points. Gavia ben Pesisa. And he defended the Jews in the presence of Alexander Mokdon, Alexander the Great, Alexander of Macedonia. That leads to the next section of the Talmud, which doesn't seem to be connected, but because you have this interaction between a Jewish sage or a scholar and a Greek leader, so that leads to the next section of the Talmud, which talks about a dialogue, again, between a prominent Jew and a prominent Roman authority. And this is the friendship, a strange friendship, and yet an important friendship that existed between Rebbe, who is Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Rabbi Yehuda the Prince, and someone who's known as Antoninus, which is Anthony. Antoninus is the what we call today Anthony. Now, he doesn't seem to be the emperor of the time, but the way it worked, it seems, is that you had the leadership in Rome, and then they would send, what is the word? The proxies. They would send individuals to each. Rome was in control of a huge amount of area, so they would send their local individual leaders, governors, to locations to rule. And the story is told that Rebbe, the great Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the one who compiled the Mishnah, developed a friendship with one of these local governors, whose name was Antoninus. That's the way in the Talmud, otherwise known as Anthony. If you look in the different commentaries, they have a hard time determining who exactly this Anthony was, because apparently Antoninus, Anthony, was a common name. Over here, I'm looking in note number 37 in the Art Scroll. He says the Doros Harishonim identify him as the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, who ruled from 161 to 180 of the Common Era. In the course of his travels through the empire, he visited Judea. There he met Rebbe, with whom, this is after the destruction of the temple, with whom he formed a lifelong friendship, which was of great benefit to the Jewish people. Antoninus engaged Rebbe in many discussions of religious and philosophical matters. So that's, I guess, the way it's explaining Doros Harishonim. I think there are other opinions that this wasn't the emperor, but a local governor. And there's a backstory here. The backstory here, and some of you may have heard this. For those who haven't, it's very fascinating. For those who've heard it, it's also fascinating. And that is that Rebbe was born. Rebbe was the son of Rabban Gamliel, the house of the Nasi. And Rebbe was born, his given name was Yehuda. Rebbe was born at a very challenging time in Jewish history. And at the time he was born, there was a decree against circumcision. And that any child who was found to be circumcised would be killed, and the mother would be killed. And Rebbe was born into the very prominent house of the Nasi, the leader of the Jewish people, the spiritual leader of the Jewish people. And Rebbe's parents chose to circumcise at grave danger. Sure enough, sometime later, there was a message sent to the house of Rebbe that there had been people observing that she was expecting a child, and people who knew that she had a baby boy. and we'd like the mother and son to report to the local governor. We want to make sure that your son is not circumcised. And so she traveled. She traveled on her way to go. She didn't have a choice. She had to go meet the governor or the emperor. And she didn't know what to do. I mean, her son was circumcised. And the story is told, brought on the Medrash, that as she was traveling, she stopped off at an inn, a rest stop, and there was a Roman noblewoman there as well. And they struck up a conversation, and this Roman noblewoman noticed that the Jewish woman was very anxious, was very worried, fearful. So she said, "What's going on?" So she told her. She said, she figured may as well. She said, "I'm bringing my son to be inspected, and the truth is he is circumcised." And this woman, in her compassion, said, "You know what? I have a son who's the same exact age as your son. I'm also recently the mother of a baby, and my son is not circumcised. So we can switch babies. Let's switch babies, and you'll go there. You'll show your uncircumcised son, and then you will meet back here, and we'll give the babies back to one another." And that's what happened. So she switched babies. She brought this woman, then the wife of Gamaliel, brought her son to the emperor and showed the child was uncircumcised, and then brought back the child, and they switched back. Now, according to one explanation I heard, this story was not only miraculous, it was not only a moment of salvation for that child, but actually what happened was that someone who was in the presence of the emperor said, I was a spy, and I saw that her son was circumcised. So if God is protecting them to such a degree that even when their son is circumcised, they could present him here as uncircumcised, then clearly this whole decree is not helpful. So you may as well abolish the decree. So that's one way I heard the story. So the decree was actually abolished because of the story. But either way, they switched, they met again, switched the babies back, and the legend has it, the sages tell us that other baby was Antoninus, was this Anthony. So in his infancy, he saved Rebbe's life, and many years later, they developed a friendship. All right, so that's some of the backdrop. That's not that episode, I don't think is mentioned in the Talmud, but the Talmud does talk about the friendship between Rebbe and Antoninus. Now, the Rebbe, before we get into the actual Talmud, to share one more point. And that is that Rebbe, in chapter 2 of Pirkei Avos is a great book, the book of Jewish ethics, and the second chapter begins with a statement from Rebbe. And what is his statement? Rebbe says, chapter 2, Mishnah 1, what is the proper path that a person should follow? I like saying this is one of my favorite missions, but really I have many favorite missions in Pirkei Avos. It says, what is the proper path for a person to follow? What's his answer? His answer is, Kol she'teferes lo min osav v'teferes lo min ha'adam. He says, a path which is beautiful to my creator, but also beautiful in the eyes of others. So you see that Rebbe had this approach that you should live life not only thinking about, is God happy with me? And as one could say, I don't care about anybody else. All that matters to me is God. If God knows that I'm doing the right thing, God knows that I'm sincere, so I don't care what anyone else thinks. And yet Rebbe says, no. A person should live a life which is beautiful in the eyes of God, but also beautiful in the eyes of others. And there's a lot of depth to that. There's a lot of depth to that idea. But it's beautiful in the eyes of others. So when you hear that, Rebbe lived a life which was certainly beautiful in the eyes of God, but he also was beautiful in the eyes of others, not just fellow Jews, but even his life, his way of life was beautiful enough that it attracted the attention of even a Roman governor who said, I want to learn from you as well. It was beautiful in the eyes of everyone. And that helped because Rebbe eventually used his political power and his wealth to implement one of the greatest, one of the most important developments in Jewish history, which was the writing of the Mishnah. He's the one who wrote the first written part of the oral tradition was Rebbe. And that required connections. It required friendship, not only with fellow Jews who all gathered together to do it, the great scholars, but also with the Romans, the Roman authorities, to allow him to gather all the sages together to put together the Mishnah. So it all comes together. My point is that Rebbe's relationship with Antoninus and his mindset in life of not just being holy and spiritual, but building connections. Look, that you should live a life which is beautiful in the eyes of all others, allowed him to put together the Mishnah, which is the foundation of the oral tradition, the Mishnah, the Talmud, Halacha. It all stems from Rebbe's work of putting together the Mishnah. Yeah.
Did the Rebbe get any backlash from other Jews for the perceived possible, like, being a traitor?
Breach from that's a great question. It's a great question. And I'm gonna assume, I don't know the answer. The fact is that the vast majority of the sages went along with it because he needed them. He needed everyone to come together and say, we're going to put together the oral Torah now into writing. And we need all of us to come together and submit our notes to write that. So clearly the majority were in support. It'd be hard to imagine that a Jew comes up with a novel idea and there isn't opposition. But so there probably was, but but again, it comes back to he was someone who was recognized, respected, revered in all circles. And that's why he was able to accomplish that. He was in Israel. He was in Israel. Right. Okay. With that in mind, now that we have a bit of a background of the who Rebbe was and his friendship with his Antoninos, so we'll share a little bit of a few conversations that they had. And that's what the Talmud gets into. Amar Lei, if you're following the actual Talmud, again, it's Sanhedrin 91a. What's that? 91a4 in the art scroll, and it's 4 lines from the bottom of the Talmudic, in the Talmud side. Just a second, I'm going to open up so we have the Maharsha. Tzadik Aleph Amud Beis. Okay. So he said, okay, says the Gemara, Omar Le Antoninos l'Rebbe. Antoninos asked or said the following point to Rebbe. Gufu neshama, a body and a soul, the body and the soul, yechoilin liftar atzma min adin. Each one, body and soul, can each find a way out of being punished for negative behavior in life. So suppose we sin in life, the end of life, we believe there's a day of judgment, there's a moment of judgment. He says both the body and the soul have what he felt was a way out of any punishment. How so? How so? Ketzad, Grufoimer, the body says, and basically the question is, when we have a body and we have a soul, who is actually responsible for the sins that we do? Which of the two? We all, I think, accept the fact that we have a body and a soul, right? The body is our body, the soul is our spirit. So which of the two is responsible for our sinful behavior? Both. All right. Well, then he says each one can say, I'm off the hook. How so? Guf Omer, the guf will say to God, the body says, Neshama chatas. It's the soul that clearly sins. And the proof to that is, Shemiyom shapir shemimeni, because the day that my soul departed from me, as soon as the soul left me, harini muto ke'evan domim, I'm sitting like a stone in the ground, the kever. So clearly, I can't do anything wrong, because as soon as the soul leaves me, I'm a stone in the ground. So then I'm clearly not to blame for any of the bad decisions that were made. Unishama emeres, the soul says, guf chata, it's the body that sins. And the proof to that is, shemiyom shapirashti mimenu, because the day that I was able to escape that body, the day that I was, so to say, released from the body, we think of the day of death. Actually, a close friend of mine lost his father to. And the question is, what exactly happens to the moment of death? It's really the soul's being, to some degree, released from the body. So he says, the day that the day that I was released from my body, Harini poirachas ba'aver kitzipar, I am flying in the air like a bird. And I'm certainly not committing any sins. So basically, each one says it's clearly not me because as soon as I was separated from the other entity, I'm not committing any sins. So I can't be culpable for that behavior. That was the logic Antoninus used to Rebbe. Obviously, there's a lot of depth. You think about that. What is he saying? So notice the soul says, I'm not responsible. The body says, I'm not responsible. Amar lei. So Rebbe responded. What's the answer to that question? What's the answer to that idea? He says, Emshal mashal. Let me give you a parable to respond in how God could nonetheless provide justice to the person for what is the response? Who exactly is being punished? Is it the body that's going to be punished? Again, we do believe in punishment, even though we don't focus on it, right? They talk about we don't believe. In fact, if I may take a step out for a moment, Judaism sees punishment as cleansing. It's not punishment for the sake of punishment. We don't believe in a vengeful God, which is looking to take revenge on human beings. We see it as a cleansing process. But the cleansing process is painful. I mean, if you don't properly brush and floss, and you go to the dentist has to clean the teeth. It's a painful process, but it's cleansing. You go to the dentist not because you're being punished for not brushing your teeth, but you're going to the dentist because you have to have your teeth cleansed. Wait, we have a budding dentist here. I should be careful. The point is that he's doing you a favor. He's cleaning your teeth. He's cleansing. He's doing a cleansing process, but it's painful. So the same is true. The process of the neshama, that the idea of what we call Gehenna, which is hell, or those products, it's a painful process for we'll see in a moment for whom, but it is a cleansing process. The question is, who has to be cleansed? The body, the soul. Each one says, I would never done on my own. I would never do anything wrong. Yes.
Does the judgment that takes place happen immediately when the soul leaves? Is it like after Shiva, during that period?
So let's complete this Gemara because maybe it addresses that to some degree, and then we'll get back to that question. When the question was posed is when exactly is that judgment? So Rebbe's response was Amar Leid. He responded, Emshal mashal. Let me give you a parable to answer this question. What could this be compared to? Lemelech basar v'dam, to a king of flesh and blood. Shehaya lo pardes, who had an orchard. Pardes na'a, a beautiful orchard. V'hayolai, and in that orchard, v'hayolai b'chayrais na'os. B'chayrais na'os, Rashi says, is te'ene ha'b'chayrais, which means the first figs that grow. The first figs, the earliest figs that ripen were considered a real delicacy. And he had this orchard with the earliest ripening figs. And he wanted it to be guarded because he knew that was a very sought after item. So what did he do? To guard that orchard, he placed 2 guards. Echad chiger, one of them was lame, couldn't really walk. The echad suma, and one was blind. So he placed a lame and a blind guard, a lame guard and a blind guard to guard the field. Why would he place those 2? Any suggestion?
I feel like I've heard this before.
Okay, that's okay. Well, why? All right, why?
They could run away with it.
So that neither of them could actually steal it, right? That's why he figures they could guard it, but they can't steal it. Okay. But apparently this is a wise duo. The chigar, the lame guard, said to the blind guard, he said, "B'chayres nice aniraya." He says, "You can't see this, but I see some really nice figs developing over there. I can't get to them because I can't walk. You can't get to them because you can't see. But here's a solution. Put me on your shoulders. And then I will direct you exactly to where they are. And then we can go and collect the figs. There you go. Solution. Put me on your shoulders. The 2 of us together can accomplish and grab the figs. Rachav chiger agavi suma. That's what happened. The lame one climbed on top of the blind one. Vehevium, and he brought him. He directed him. He was his ways, and it weighs W. How do you spell ways? W-A-Z-E. He brought him to show them where the figs were. They grabbed the figs for achlum, and they had a wonderful feast of delicious early ripened figs. A few days later, Bob Pala Pardes, the owner of the orchard, came, and he noticed a bunch of missing figs. Amar Lahan, he said to the two guards, B'chayrais nice, the beautiful figs, Hechanein, where are they? Amar Chigar, the lame person said, Klum yeshli raglaim, do I have any legs? You're looking at me. It's not me. I don't even have legs to go, to go collect them. Amar Sumat, the blind person said, Klum yeshli einayim, do I have eyes to see? Wait, it's not me. Each one said, it can't be me because I can't do it. But this orchard owner was a wise man. Ma asa. So what did he do? Hirkiv chigar al gabi sumi. He said to the lame person, why don't you climb on the blind person's shoulders, and then I'll judge you like that. I'll judge you as you sit on the shoulders of the blind person, because now together I see that you can access the figs. He saw through their plot. He said, you're right. I can't judge either of you individually, but if I put you together, then I can judge you and punish you for your crime. That was the parable that Rebbe gave to Anthony. So he says, and he concluded, Af HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so too God in heaven, maybe neshama. He says the neshama comes before him and says, I couldn't do this because you see the body's not here. I don't do anything wrong. The body says, I couldn't do this without the neshama. I'm just a stone in the ground. So God says, you know what? I'll put the two of you together, the body and the soul together, the don oisam ke'echad, and now I can judge you because together you were certainly capable of committing this sin. Now, Shenemar, and there's a pasuk Yikra al Shemayim Me'av al Aretz Ladinimah, the pasuk which is from Tehillim, which means God will call to the heavens above and to the earth to judge his people. What's the meaning of the verse? What does it mean? God was saying Tehillim. God will call from that. We could ask the Tehillim expert. I'm sure he has an explanation. But the Gemara says, what does it mean? He'll call to the heavens above and to the earth below. It's God, and then I will judge them. It's God's way of saying, I'll call to the soul, which is heavenly, and to the body, which is earthly, combine them, and then Yadin, and then Ladin Amoy, then I can judge my people. Yikra Shemayim Me'al Zu Neshama, calling to heaven is the soul, calling to earth is the body, Zehagro. All right, so that was his answer. Yes?
How would the body be punished?
So that, very good. So Jeff is asking a good question. What does it mean? How is the body punished? Practically speaking, what does this mean? Is there actually judgment of a body and a soul? Does somehow, we know that if we mention that upon death, the soul separates from the body, this Gemara seems to indicate that at some point there's a judgment in which the body and soul are then fused back together and judged. Yeah.
The animal soul is kind of like be a common denominator, so to say, like kind of know what the animal soul wants. It's not. I don't think that the animal soul is so different. As in, like, is there a bunch of different animal souls? Or
Wait.
they all kind of have the same desire, so to say. Like the soul, like the godly soul, is like has so many facets to it, so to say.
Okay, I see. So Dan, you're suggesting, because there's people here watching, that there's the animal soul. So are you saying in this analogy, is the animal soul the body or the soul? It's the body. Very good. Okay, so very good. So what does this mean? So I want to share two different understandings of this. I'm speaking here to a group of people who are perfectly righteous, so nobody has to worry about any of this. When we talk about divine punishment, it doesn't apply to any of us. And even if any of us have made certain mistakes, then we have plenty of life left to do to do tshuva and to repent, so we don't have to worry about this. But theoretically, for those out there who have committed mistakes or who don't do tshuva, so what is the meaning of this? What does it mean that the body and the soul come together? All right. So the truth is, you may recall last week, the start of our class, before we got to Gevia ben Pesisa and his defense of the Jewish people, there was a previous Gemara. And that's really the thread which carries through the Gemara over here. And that was the question of Tchias HaMesim, about souls coming back to life. We pointed out last week that it's actually one of the 13 principles of faith is the idea that Tchias HaMesim, that at some point bodies will come back to life. Bodies with souls will come back to life. So according to one understanding of and I'll read, actually, it's in the article shares both ideas over here. according to one understanding, Rashi basically says that at some point, the resurrection of the dead, one of the purposes of the resurrection of the dead is so that the body and the soul can be judged as one. That's the way Rashi understands this Gemara. It seems the Rashi is saying that the true judgment for a person's behavior only happens when the body and the soul can come back and then be judged as a unit. Because if they're not a unit, again, the blind person on his own and the lame person on his own can't be judged or can't be incriminated because they couldn't have done something wrong on their own. Only together.
Aren't there several versions of the soul recycling?
You're saying the reincarnation.
Yeah.
Fine, but each reincarnation comes back to life
Every
separately.
time
Yes. Yes.
So a bit of your neshama is going to be
Correct.
in each one of those.
Correct.
generations.
Correct. That's why it says the question over here was posed, what about reincarnation? This came up a little bit last week too. And the point is that every incarnation comes back to life. It's not just one incarnation or the last one or the first one or the best one. It is every incarnation. It's because each incarnation does include a certain new element of neshama which didn't exist beforehand.
So at the end, are they? They all going to beat each other? I mean, what?
Probably, I don't know. There's a good question. I don't know. We don't know exactly. I don't know. I imagine that's what we talk about. That there's a lot of truth. We call the world to come the world of truth because there's so much that we don't know, and that becomes clarified in the next world. Yes.
Is there a limit how much life soul can come back?
The Arizal says 7. Yes, he does actually give a number, seven reincarnations. So we're getting back to this. So Rashi says that the meaning over here is that the body and soul come back to life and they're judged that way. All right. However, there's other understandings of this because that seems to be strange. That means that until that point, there's no judgment. I mean, that's the time that's in the future. What about someone who passes away? What's the judgment until that point? So other explanations are given. One is that the Ben Yehoyada, which is the Ben Ishchai, a Sephardi, great Sephardi scholar, and he says, no, he's talking about the fact that there's judgment for body and soul after life. That's called chibut hakever, which is the part of the process of the body's disintegration in the ground is a form of justice. That's a form of cleansing. The body returns to dust. That is a process in which the body is cleansed. And that's the way he understands this. The body and soul are both simultaneously going through judgment because it was simultaneous, the body and soul, which were able to commit the sin. But then there's a third understanding, and this was what Danny was referencing, and that is that the truth is another way of understanding this Gemara altogether, and that is that it's not necessarily the body and the neshama, but rather the animal soul and the spirit behind it. In other words, the body is just physical flesh, and the body can't do anything. The body can't do anything. But rather the bodily pursuits is more like when we talk about, the urges of the body or the passions of the body. That's what this means. It's the passions of the body versus the spirit of a person. Those are two different elements within us. That even within that, there's another way of understanding this. It's not body and soul, but the bodily pursuits and the spirit of man. And those are two different things. And therefore, even when we talk about the judgment of both of them together, we're not talking about the physical body. We're talking about the animal soul more so, along with the human soul, which makes the choice to follow the animalistic pursuits. So that's a third understanding of this, is that we're specifically referring to the skin and bones. Skin and bones really can't do anything, right or wrong, right? They're just a vehicle. But that's a third way of understanding this Gemara. And therefore, both the blind and the lame entity and the analogy are both spiritual entities, but that we have within us a animalistic drive and a more spiritual drive, and they combine to do the sin. For those who study Tanya, I think there's more logic to this, because the Tanya talks about the different elements which make up the animal soul, and we then choose to follow the animal soul. There's the I, which chooses to follow my animalistic instincts, right? If I have an animalistic drive, I don't want to go too far into this, but the point is, if I have a craving for something, whatever it is, so then so what is it that craves that? Whatever, let's say it's a sandwich. Let's give a simple example. I crave a sandwich. What craves the sandwich? Is it my body that craves the sandwich? It's not my body that craves the sandwich. My body is skin and is flesh. What is it? There is an animalistic drive within me that craves the sandwich. But then, who is it? There's a part of me that chooses to follow that craving or to reject that craving. Say I'm on a diet and I say, this sandwich is not good for me. So there's a part of me, the animalistic element, which craves it, which says I want. And then there's a deeper determination, a deeper soulful part of my identity, which says either I will follow that pursuit or I won't. So those two beings, the urge, which is a animalistic desire, and the part of me which chooses to follow that urge or not, that may be the two entities which this Gemara is referring to. So it's not a body and soul, but a bodily urge, and the soul behind that which chooses whether to follow it. All right, makes sense. So those are the different ways of understanding this Talmudic dialogue between Rebbe and Antoninus. Okay, let's go to. I'm going to jump a little bit. If you're following the text, I'm going to jump. The next section is another question and answer between Antoninus and Rebbe about the sun and how the sun goes up and sun goes down. I want to skip that. Just it's somewhat abstract, but also we only have a limited amount of time. I want to get to the next 2 points, which is, I think, a little bit more practical or interesting. The Amale Antoninus Rebbe. So, if you're following in the art scroll, we're now going to jump to the top of 91b2. Another conversation that happened between Antoninus and Rebbe, and he asked the following: Neshama, the soul, me'emasai nitna ba'adam. When does it enter the body? When does the soul enter the body? He didn't. He just asked, when does it enter? He didn't. That would be a good response. But the question is, when does the neshama enter the body? It sounds like, when does it begin? When does the entry begin? That this body now has a soul in it.
Boy or girl, Jewish or non.
He didn't get to that, but he did say the following two possibilities. He said, Misha'as Pekida or Misha'as Yitzira. Is it from the moment of, all right, so here you have two understandings of what this is. It from when the moment of, let's give the simple understanding, the moment of conception or the moment of formation? Conception or formation? That was his question. He understood that for sure there's a soul in the body before it's born. That was not a question. The only question is, when? There's at the moment of conception or the moment of formation. Now, if we're gonna spell it out a little more, there's two understandings of the word pikida. Now, formation is one thing. Formation is understood to be about 40 days in. 40 days, we have this idea, which actually has its support today in science too, that at 40 days, after 40 days of pregnancy, there is a significant change in the fetus. So halachically, 40 days is a significant milestone. And that is, without going down a complex road, there are some situations in which a fetus can be aborted until 40 days, but not beyond 40 days, halachically. So that's the question. When does the neshama enter? Does it enter? Let's just go again with the simpler explanation here. Is it by conception or by formation? Let's say 40 days in. So what did he answer? Omar Lay. So he answered Mishas Yitzira. He says, I feel that it's from the time of formation. As Rashi says, Shenikram Kula Bebasar Gidin Vatsamas. That's when the flesh and the sinews and the bones come together to form into what is a body. Omar Le, to which Antoninus responded, he said, I disagree with that. He said, Efsher chaticha shel basar omedes shlosha yamim below melach ve'ena masrachas. Can a piece of meat stand for 3 days without being salted, without preservative, and without going rotten? It can't be. Just like a piece of meat cannot last for 3 days without preservative, it must be that this flesh, and even for the first 40 days, there's a certain entity, this flesh. He says it can't exist on its own without a life to it. It must be el mishas pekida. It must be from the time of conception. Although Rashi says pekida over here doesn't mean conception. Rashi says it may even be before conception, because we have a separate tractate which says that there's an angel designated to take the drop of seed and bring it before God and say, what is this seed going to be? Is it going to be male or female? Is it going to be wise or simple? So that's what's called pekida, is that it's a more spiritual idea, that there's an angel which designates what this drop of seed will be. And according to him, it says Rashi says that's when the soul enters. There's already the entry point of the soul then. So Antoninus basically said that if just as a piece of meat cannot last on its own for 3 days without going rotten unless it's being preserved, so too, says Rashi, if not for a soul which is preserving this entity, this drop, it would rot in the womb, and therefore it must have something which is preserving it, and he says that must be the soul.
So Antoninus how does he have all his chachma?
He was a wise person. He was studied, and according to some opinions, he studied with Rebbe. But this is not only what he was answering was not a Jewish concept. He was saying, based on my understanding of the world, an entity, a drop, cannot withstand. It has to have a preservative. What is preserving this seed from going rotten? It must be a preservative. What's a preservative? It must be a soul. There must be some spiritual power which is preserving it.
He wasn't Jewish, right?
Some say he converted, but no, the general understanding is that he was not Jewish.
He was the mother of Rebbe, even breastfeeding, no?
So we spoke about that earlier on, that story about how
He's
that.
implying that the breastfeeding was what gave him wisdom. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, right. Very good. Okay, it's a great point. So you're suggesting, because there's people watching, that based on the story we said earlier, because Rebbe's mother, he breastfed with Rebbe's mother during that whole baby switch. So therefore, he had therefore, it's that milk which gave him the ability to then have deeper understanding of Torah ideas. Anyways, so this is what he says. So this is what he said. Right. So back to here. So he said to Rebbe, I believe that the only thing that could preserve, and not just preserve it, but it can't be that this drop can grow and develop without some sort of powerful preservative. And that powerful preservative must be a neshama. And Rebbe heard that, and he said, Amar Rebbe, Rebbe said, Davar zeh, this thing, limdani Antoninus, this is one of the things that I learned from Antoninus, that he taught me, because he said I agreed. When he gave me that logic, he taught me that. Umikra, but furthermore, mikra masayato, but once he taught me that, I found a verse which supports it. Shenamar, as the pasuk states, Upekuda, this is from Eov, the book of Job, chapter 10, verse number 12. Upkudascha shamra ruchi. Upkudascha shamra ruchi, which means your attention has guarded my spirit. That's the English translation. What does that have to do with what Antoninus said? The word upkudascha could also be misha'as pekida, from the moment of conception. Pekuda, the word pekudascha, which is translated as your attention, has a double meaning, which is also the moment of conception. My spirit was being guarded, which means that already at conception there is a existence of a soul. It doesn't mean the soul has fully entered the body. It doesn't mean it's the neshama as we know it, but there's already a spiritual, it's a profound idea, that from the moment of conception, there's already a spiritual, aside for the tiny fledgling seed that's being developed in the womb of the mother, there already is an element of soul attached to that. Okay, let's read the next conversation and then we'll wrap it up. The next conversation was has a certain similarity to the previous one. So he asked, Antoninus asked Rabbi the following question: when does the evil inclination begin to have any control over a person? When does the evil inclination begin? Misha'as yitzira or misha'as yitzia? Is it from the moment of the embryo's formation, or from when the baby leaves the moment of birth? When does the Yetzer Hara begin to have control over a human being?
I say the moment that it leaves, because the baby learns for the entire time.
Okay, so Eli is suggesting that we have a separate Gemara Nida, which says that the baby studies the fetus somehow is taught the entire Torah. So that would suggest Yitzia. Rabbi said, Amalei Mishas Yitzira. He said, I believe it's from the moment of the formation of the body. As soon as the body is formed, already there's a Yetzer Hara, there's already an evil inclination.
Yeah, but tell me what can you do in the womb?
Oh, so therefore, Amalei, Antoninus responded.
Esau was jumping out.
Very good. This is all very good stuff. Amalei. So he responded, if he has an evil inclination, then he should kick and then leave. Now, the baby would force its way out because of that evil inclination. He says it must be that the Yetzer Hara begins when the baby leaves, when the baby is born. That's when the Yetzer Hara enters the body. Rabbi said, again, this is one of the things that I studied from and I learned from Antoninus. And then I found Umikra Messiah, and I found a verse which supports that. Shenamar, the verse states, LePesach chatos rovetz, sin crouches at the door. Sin crouches at the door is from the book of Bereshis, actually. Through Genesis, Bereshis chapter 4, verse number 7. LePesach chatos rovetz, sin waits at the door. So what does that mean? So one way of saying the more simple way of understanding that verse, what does it mean? Sin waits at the door. It means sin is knocking. Sin is waiting for the opportunity to tempt you to do something wrong. So sin is always there at the door. Be very careful because it's right there at the door waiting for the opportunity to seduce you to sin. But Rabbi said another way of saying it is the door represents the opening of life, that a child is born at the door of life, doorway of life. That's where sin, that's where the Yetzer Hara begins. So there's the idea the Yetzer Hara begins only at birth, and that's how Rebbe found a source for what Antoninus taught him. Now, it was mentioned over here. What about the story in the Torah about Esav kicking? That seems to indicate that Esav already in the womb had a Yetzer Hara. So
Also, that when Rivka was pregnant, when she walked next to Shul, Yaakov wanted to go out, and
right. So that's the point of it, that he was kicking when she walked by there. So if you look in the article, he brings down this question and says, you could look at the commentaries, Beersheva, Yad David, Magal Sayam. But a thought that comes to mind is based on a Sikha. The Rebbe talks about that and says that the kicking in the womb was not necessarily evil, but rather that Esav was drawn to. He quotes the Rambam that you have certain people who are drawn to have a wilder nature. It doesn't mean that they're evil. It just means that they're drawn. Being drawn to it can lead to two results. It can lead to sinful behavior. Some people are wild. Let's give a simple example. Some people have a certain wild nature. Is wild evil? No. Wild can be channeled to evil, or it can be channeled to holiness. So Esav had a certain wildness to him, and therefore he was a certain wild side. That's not evil. The Yetzer Hara upon birth tried to channel that wildness towards evil, but it says David HaMelech also had a wild side, and David HaMelech found a way to channel his wildness into serving God. So a way to explain the kicking in the womb was that Esav had a certain wild side, or even drawn to certain elements of the world, but that wasn't evil. That allowed for the possibility of evil wildness, but also holy wildness. Holy wildness means where you do things in a holy way, but with passion, with excitement, maybe someone being irrational about it. So that explains how in the womb there was no evil. There was certain tendencies, but they weren't evil. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, only began upon birth. Anyways, so that we wrap it up. And I guess the common denominator of different Gemaras today is the idea of the body and the soul, and the and how they operate, and how the body. And to conclude in a more positive note, and that is that just as in that initial Gemara we said about how the body and the soul, each one says, I couldn't commit the sin because on my own I can't do it. That same logic works for a mitzvah too. And that's just as the body and the soul can't commit a sin without the help of the other, you can't commit a mitzvah without the other two. The soul needs the body to fulfill a mitzvah, the body needs the soul to fulfill a mitzvah. Both need. So for the mitzvah too, you can use the same exact logic, the same story, with the response that the person says, well, I'll take the blind person and the lame person and put them together, and that's how they're going to be punished. The same thing can be said about reward for mitzvahs. That God says the body and the soul have to come together in order to be rewarded, because each one needs the other to fulfill a mitzvah. So it gives you a beautiful understanding of our body and soul, that we need one another. We're a perfect partnership, because without the other, a mitzvah can't be done. Only when the soul is inspired out of love for God and fear of God, and out of love for another person to do the good thing, then it harnesses the body and says, okay, take your hand, put it into your pocket, take out $1 and give it to tzedakah. Take your feet, walk somewhere to help someone. Say, use your mouth, use your eyes, use your ears. The body and the soul need one another, both when it comes to mistakes, but on a positive note, we need one another for the mitzvahs, and therefore God says the reward for the reward for your actions also will be body and soul coming together, because that's the only way the mitzvah was done. All right. Laila Tov, everyone. Thank you for joining. My pleasure. Good to see you all.
And Miriam, your sister said a warm hello to you.
Thank you. Very good. Say hello back, please.